How is everybody doing this evening? We're here tonight to have our annual meeting between the Board of Education and the MCCPTA. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Brenda Wolf, President of the Montgomery County Board of Education. At this time, I'm going to go around and ask my board members to introduce themselves, starting with our Vice President, Carla Silvestri.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all, even if it's virtual.
Dr. Daka.
Good evening.
Ms. Mandrowski.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Ms. Evans. I know she was coming in, so I'll come back to her. Ms. Harris.
Good evening, everybody. Really looking forward to this.
Ms. O'Looney.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all.
Ms. Shebra, are you in yet?
I am.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Well, we all agree that a strong partnership between parents and the school system promotes student success. As Neil Blumenthal, a founder of Warby Parker, said, a good collaboration pushes the boundaries of both partners. And we come together tonight as partners ready to engage in good collaboration. Traditionally, we come together and we have a Q&A session and some food, I think. But tonight we want to try something different. We will structure our meeting around the concepts of collaboration and partnership. We will spend some time this evening working together to think about how we can move the needle on some of the issues that we have struggled with in our system. We often talked about our diversity being our strength, and it is. We have a community that has a rich array of culture, racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and linguistic diversity. That beauty does not come without its own challenges. How we continue to build a more equitable system takes intentionality, creativity, and commitment. We're excited to be able to engage in problem solving tonight around some difficult areas of work. Language access to opportunities such as middle school athletics and enrichment, the role of our local PTAs in raising funds for our schools are all topics we have struggled with. Tonight, we will struggle together and put our collective IQ to work. We are looking forward to a great conversation and will generate innovations. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia Simonson, President of MCCPTA, to get us started. Cynthia?
Thank you, Ms. Wolf, and thank you to the board for having us here and to Dr. McKnight and the other members of MCPS. I start every meeting with our PTAs the exact same way, with reading what our mission is, and it's to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. And I always end with, and that, my friends, is what we're here to do this evening. That if we are not doing that, then there are so many other things that volunteers can be doing with their time. And so I always appreciate the volunteers that come forward, that bring their time, their talent, and their treasure to support our children, to ensure that they are meeting their potential. I often think about a phrase from my childhood where we talked about iron sharpening iron. And it was always my, where I grew up in the South, they would talk about this, that conflict is okay. That is part of the iron sharpening the iron. And so as an advocacy organization, sometimes we do, we come on strong with the board and with MCPS, and we struggle. But I think, as Ms. Wolf said before, I really do see this as a struggling together, sharpening each other's iron in order to have the best product. And that best product is what is going to support our children. And so, and is there any other, is there a more worthy cause, right? So I want to thank my board members for being here this evening. There are far too many for me to have you all introduce yourselves. But I ask that tonight, as we are engaging, as you may take the floor, that you would introduce yourself and provide your name and also your role on our board in the clusters or the roles that you represent. I appreciate the agenda that we have crafted this evening. And I know, hear my dog. I know many times we have these meetings and it often ends up being, it almost feels like a public hearing, right? Like we are saying, this is what we have, and then you all are responding. Sometimes it's the staff from the school that's responding. Tonight, we really did want this to be a little different, with us really talking about and sharing how we can do some of these things differently. And the first thing that we have coming up is serving our families for whom English is not their first language. Certainly, we have all struggled with that. It's been one of the recurring themes this year within our PTA delegates assemblies and also our board. It gets a lot of attention on our e-list as families are struggling with, where do you find those translators? How do you reach these communities? It is not without intent. It is the struggle. So I've asked Lima Abdullah. Lima, if you can unmute. Lima Abdullah is our Vice President of Advocacy our Advocacy Chair for our committee for MCCPTA. She also serves as the president of East Silver Spring Elementary School. And I wanted her to share sort of what has been happening at East Silver Spring and the challenges that she's faced on the ground. And so if we could start there. Lima?
Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. My internet is a little shaky, so hopefully I'm not buffering. Greetings to you from East Silver Spring Elementary School, where our principal likes to say it's a good day to be a panda, and it is. At our elementary school, which is in an extremely diverse community, in a community in which the predominant language actually is not English, it's a mix of Amharic and Spanish. We as a PTA try to support our school by helping ensure that there's translation both of documents from the school and communications with the PTA. It's something that this year in particular as a PTA, we feel is especially important to help ensure that our full community is at the table. And I say that piece about the full community because I think that everyone here, that's what we all want. And it is my hope that as we consider how to get the full community in all of our areas of Montgomery County at the table, we think about that linguistic and that cultural piece. The way this plays out in our particular school, we have a lot of families who are Amharic speaking, native to Eritrea or Ethiopia. We have a lot of families from Spanish speaking countries and Latin and Central America. We have families from parts of Asia. There's a lot of diversity. In that space, in order to help build an inclusive community, one of the things we as a PTA have found especially useful is to have meetings that are not only multiply translated, right, from English language, but to flip it so that the meetings themselves are in those people's languages and the English translation comes to you. One of the reasons why we're trying to take this approach is that we feel that it builds empathy for those who are used to being in a position of power and as the dominant language. And it puts you in a position of being able to really empathize with someone in the community who speaks a different language and really think through what is that experience like and how can I help this process be smoother for them? So we have an event like that that's coming up on Tuesday. We were very excited about with a community partner, an Ethiopian restaurant that's going to allow us to have our meeting there. Other things that we've tried to do as an organization, when we have events, we have a great group of parents who speak the language, who circulate through the crowd. And when there are votes or when there are matters to be discussed, they are the on-the-ground translators. So it's not a situation where they have to wait for the translation. It's in-the-minute translation so that everyone can feel included in the full conversation. We've changed our international night, we've made it a day, and we have eliminated performances that are language-based so that we can have more universal performances, things like dance and music, and then translation where needed in other spaces. So those are the things, some of the things that the PTA is doing. Here's where our school, and I would imagine schools like ours, could use support. Gets done is in the classroom and work with families and interfacing with families. And we at the East Silver Spring Elementary School PTA feel it's really important that from the door, from the minute children get off the school bus to the minute a parent comes into the office and needs assistance, they should be greeted in their language and not necessarily have to wait for someone to be obtained elsewhere to speak to them, because that's a disenfranchising experience that we part of getting for and pushing for is a consideration to really think about how can we potentially get people to be for example, or administrative person who speaks Spanish or speaks Thai or speaks Amharic, but as a person who is there as a translator in the building, and they just happen to have the skills of an administrative assistant. This approach, this might free up what I understand to be some of the red tape and issues in bringing in folks, right, the right way that we want to make sure we bring them in. And it's a value add, because you may find when you look and you begin to bring these people that sometimes those folks might be able to be shared within a school cluster. We feed to Tacoma Park Middle School, for example. What if we had a situation in which the translator for Amharic is also shared with Tacoma Park? Children are already known and felt and seen and heard, and then they transition and the families already have the same person in the office. So that is a suggestion from me on behalf of MCCPTA and using our school as an example. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lima. And you were cutting out in a couple of places, so I wanted to just restate that. Idea for our board and MCPS is that the idea of, at present, if we're hiring for an administrative assistant or a secretary in our schools, we hire for a secretary and then we say Amharic preferred or Spanish speaking preferred. And the question is whether there is an opportunity in our schools where there is high language differentials that we are actually able to hire for an Amharic speaker, secretarial or administrative preferred, that kind of flipping that so that in these high impact areas where language is so critically important to the engagement of these families, that it would not be the secretary position. Hopefully we can find somebody with that skill, but rather we're really targeting to higher language, and those other skills are secondary to being an interpreter or a translator in our schools. So I don't know if Lori Christina, if this is an opportunity to do the jam board to get a reaction from folks, or if you wanted to.
So Cynthia, why don't we first see if folks have questions, would like to ask Lima questions, or have any questions for the PTA around the language challenges, and then I think it's a great idea and we can do a jam board.
Perfect. Do you want to? Do you know how to use your reaction? Your hands. You raise your hands. Are there any questions? Yes, Rebecca, old school raising hand.
I see Carla. Go ahead, Carla.
No, I was just saying, yes, I know how to use the reactions. But I I don't have any questions. I'm very happy to hear this topic as top of your list, because this is one of the reasons how I got involved in the PTA and countywide leadership. So I have a lot to say, but I don't want to dominate the meeting. So I'll turn it back to you. We can use the Jamboard to get everyone's feedback.
So
Anyone else?
Darlene,
Okay.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go
Are we
ahead.
ready to do the, are we ready to do the Jamboard?
Yeah, I have it for you. Ready for the next group? Because I only have it for the next portion. Hold on. All right, so I think everybody has a link. I'm going to send it again. And what I need you to do is just if you could push on this link, and then everybody will be able to get in the chart that you see that's shared on my screen.
Right, so what we wanted to be able to do is for everyone to be able to, what are, to respond to, what are those obstacles? What is it that we could do to better serve these families? Is there something that from MCPS perspective, from the board's perspective, from the PTA's perspective, just ideas around serving our families for whom English is not their first language? Lima offered one suggestion, which had to do with being able to, hire for those positions specifically. For those who haven't used Jamboard before, Darlene, do you want to walk people through how to do this?
Sure. If you've never used Jamboard before, you'll see where my cursor is. You'll just see that it says sticky note. You'll click on it. And you can type, for example, if transportation might be an issue, you would put whatever you need to put in there, hit save, and then you can get out of it and move your sticky note wherever you would like.
Perfect. So why don't we spend a few minutes, and as you're writing things on here, we'll just take a couple of minutes. This is like if we were in person and people going up to the whiteboard. So some of the things that I see people putting up here, identifying and sourcing qualified individuals is important to reaching these families. The initial outreach with these families, schedules and family obligations. Lack of childcare is something that's impacting being able to reach these families. Oh, here's money. Having money to hire staff with these skills. And I saw something else that they're moving around, but hiring more bilingual staff. Equipping schools with headsets to allow for simultaneous interpretation, right, during those meetings. Right, communicating with those families. Oftentimes they don't understand why they should even go to PTA meetings. What's all this PTA about? we certainly have heard this, many of the phrases that are used. I've been listening to MCPS long enough. Sometimes some of you even wonder if I work for the system because I'm able to use all of your language, but some of those words don't translate as well into other languages, or there's not a direct translation. So there's confusing words, there's confusing terms. This is great. So, okay, so as we see all of these different ideas, these are all the things that are the obstacles. They are the things that we need or that we want in order to better connect. So I guess the question is, and maybe to have a little more dialogue, seeing all of these things up here, are there things that we can think of now that, looking at one another and thinking about how we support our families, things that we can do collaboratively? Certainly, we can advocate to you, for more hiring, for more funding for those things. But are there other things that collectively we can do? One thing that we've talked about at different times is PTAs wanting to access translators interpreters, wanting to have our meetings interpreted so that we can hit a bigger realm of individuals. And there doesn't seem to be much of a pool available through MCPS. Not many people that are on those rosters. And I know one of the things that we've run into is parents, and Carla, maybe this is something that you can even speak to in your experience. I think parents gladly and willingly translate for their friends and neighbors. They'll happily be the interpreter at a meeting until it becomes an expectation, until all of those kind of come together and those impacts. And so how do we balance that? Or are there ideas for how we can balance that?
I like what East Silver Spring is doing and having at least a portion of the meeting in language. And so you don't have to have interpretation, because anyone that has put those headsets on knows you're just getting like half of the content. It's really hard to follow. And so, if you can have a leader lead the discussion in language, and then maybe just report back to the whole group. But I don't know. I don't even know how the PTA accesses interpreters. Are those MCPS interpreters, or do you have to pay for them?
So historically, and maybe one of our other board members, when the school asks for an interpreter, they can usually get someone, so if there's something specific, they can put a request in. It usually, I think, requires a few weeks notice. But for something like a PTA meeting, those are generally not provided through MCPS. It is when interpreters are provided through MCPS, I think the school absorbs whatever that cost is. But when it is like a PTA meeting, I know in my schools, it's often the assistant principal who also serves as the interpreter because she's fluent. But it hasn't been. It's often a parent volunteer that provides that support.
I wonder, Cynthia, if there is an opportunity here for us to consider maybe coming up with some sort of small grant program so that you're actually able to pay somebody first you'd have to identify those PTAs where the need is the highest, I would expect, because I'm not talking about a lot of money, but it's just something that you could think about whether or not, we could provide any sort of grant money, because I think it's very important that all of our families be able to access the PTA meetings, not just those that can speak English.
Right. Agreed. Laura Mitchell and then Debbie Orsak.
And there are some companies, Ms. Wolf, that do that locally, and some of them will do it at a reduced rate or once in a while pro bono for us. So that might be a great partnership to look at. But it is tremendously difficult to ask our parents and our members to do the translation, because especially board members, we try to get a diverse board. But if there's one Spanish speaking or Amharic speaking person, it starts to look like tokenism by asking them to be on the board. And that becomes offensive. If we're asking them, they can't process and participate, and they lose out because all they're doing is translating. So that's a real challenge too.
Now, I understand that. Believe it or not, lawyers get the same sort of deal. People think that you should just come and provide a service. And after, you might do it once or twice, but after that, it becomes problematic. So I do understand what you're saying. I'm just not sure what we can do. And that was just a suggestion about maybe we could look at whether or not we could come up with a small pool of money for you to identify your most highly impacted schools where this is really needed in order for the parents to be able to access the PTA.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Students as well.
I think, though, that the idea, and I see somebody put my idea, whoever did, we're thinking alike. I think that maybe we should look at colleges and universities that have language programs, because if you go to a company, I'm sure you got to pay the company rate, whereas if you go to a college or university, you might be able to stretch any sort of money we might be able to come up with a lot further.
Right. Debbie Orsak?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so at WJ, we have interpreters. We get them through our counseling office. It's 2 weeks minimum notice, but it's MCPS translators. But what we also, it's not just language. It is sign language, but it's not always the spoken language. We also use the sign language interpreters. We run into the issue where the MCPS ones do not work on the weekends. So if we have a weekend program, which is sometimes easier for families to come to, we can't get an MCPS interpreter for that program. We haven't run into it recently where we've had to do it, but we have had parents who have helped out with sign language and with other language. And then for translating documents, we actually use the students. Our Hispanic club translates documents and stuff for SSL hours. And that's something that we think is good because it's involving the students in it. We have not asked them to be interpreters at meetings, but we have had them translate documents. But the MCPS interpreters have worked, except for the fact that we cannot get them on the weekend, but they are free of charge, which helps a lot.
Cynthia, I see Sharice Scott has her hand up.
Yes. Sharice?
Hi, thank you. Sorry I can't be on camera at the moment, but I just wanted to share while we're speaking about language that the young students have voiced and expressed interest in wanting to have more diverse languages to learn in school. And so as we work toward having longevity in some of the solutions that we come up with on these calls, I'd like to just, share these could be strategies that we can filter in as we're doing, budgets and teachers and staff, that the students really want to learn some of the languages that we're trying to figure out how to translate. So I love Debbie's idea about the high school clubs. That's low hanging fruit because they need different ways to be active outside of school. That's how they build their bonds and camaraderie. So I just want to take a moment to throw that in the bucket for future reference.
Thank you. And for those that can't see the chat, there's a few other ideas that are in the chat having to do with using the Montgomery volunteer portal as possibly an opportunity to create a bank of either seniors or other community members that would be willing to serve as interpreters. And I think one of the things, and Ms. Wolf, I want to be sure that this is clear. We're not just talking about PTA meetings, but really, as we are building community, as we're working with, I see Everett Davis right here in front of my screen, but working on those community engagement pieces, that the PTA can be a piece of that, and certainly we want to see that broadened, and that we don't have these communities that feel like they're not part of what's going on. Whether they join a PTA or not is not really our primary purpose, but is really to ensure that we are engaging those families, and that they do feel included in the community that they are now a part of. I'm just looking at some of these other comments and the opportunity to check with the Gilchrist Center. Carla.
Yes, one of my sticky notes was that I believe Everett's shop has done or can do like a best practices where all these ideas are kind of documented and what has worked and what hasn't worked. One best practice that I like is to have if you're doing a PowerPoint, to have the PowerPoint translated, because you can send that off to someone with time. It's a little bit of a less intensive skill than interpretation. And at least you're in the meeting and you're reading what is being said in your own language. So that's another best practice that I like. Of course, it has to be simple language to be understood in any language.
Right. And you have to do that PowerPoint beforehand, right? Like, no more doing it on the fly if you're trying to interpret it, or translate it. Sharice, I see your hand is still up. Did you have something else, or?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay, just checking. Any other thoughts or comments, or? Laura Stewart?
Hi, I put something in chat, but I'm learning about resources right here in this chat and from people on here. So maybe we could have an MCPS page on the website with some of links to these great ideas and and build that out as we go as a resource. Because some of this I didn't know about.
Right. And I think one of the things that, we with Zoom, something that actually became available to us unexpectedly is the benefit of using Zoom for parent meetings and parent engagement. We've seen certainly our PTA meetings have grown exponentially because of the convenience of being able to, meet from the comfort of your own home. But part of that is, at least the Zoom accounts that MCCPTA uses, we are able to add an interpreter aspect to it. So people can be listening in their language if you have those interpreters. And so to one of the points that Ms. Wolf made, being able to hire individuals to provide that interpretation service, because there is that concern about, when you tap into those volunteers so many times, or and so I think having that grant option, making that available to schools that have that high percentage of other language within their community, I think that would be a tremendous help. And also one of the things that we've talked about is are there varying levels, and creating sort of that varying levels of interpretation, maybe for a special education IEP meeting, there is a certain level that's needed, but maybe for a community engagement, as Lima was saying beforehand, maybe it's just about having people there that speak the language, that can greet in their own language, those kinds of things. So I see a couple of other comments in the chat. One of these is a lot of key information is still all in English on the MCPS website. And certainly I'm sure that's true of all of our school sites also. And so, being more mindful, I know we have the language interpretation on our sites. But again, for people to really understand how all of that works. And I see other, great comments in here. Everett Davis saying, we adopted the recommended PowerPoint strategy during our multilingual parent academy sessions. And so, already doing some of those things. And I know many of our PTAs are also providing their slides in dual or tri-languages. So any other last thoughts, comments? Darlene, thank you for running that Jamboard. I'm hoping this next piece as we move on will be something that perhaps more people will want to jump up, raise their virtual hands. Is having to do. We wanted to move into equitable access, and specifically, we wanted to talk about. We're seeing in some of our middle schools, and I'll just kind of frame what we're seeing in our middle schools, but also hearing through our e-lists and different places. We've had a number of middle schools that haven't been able to have a full athletic team this year. So they might be planning to have a cross-country meet, but there just weren't enough kids for a middle school to have a cross-country team, or they didn't have enough kids to have a softball team. And it caused us to really question, like, what's going on there? Like, why wouldn't a school be able to have that? And one of the things that, parents, within our, our PTA leadership identified is that, like, it was a mad scramble to get physicals for those kids, for their own children. And so, we all know it has to be done, but it always sneaks up on you, right? And especially for students who are 7th graders or even new 8th graders this year, and I know many of you were middle school principals, they don't compete in 6th grade. So that's they're not even thinking about physicals or the need for that. And then, school starts this year certainly was very unusual. And then, the physical has to be in for you to go to the tryouts and before you know it, it's like tomorrow. And so one of the questions we had is just in terms of, how some of that could work for our students maybe a little better. Is there a way to look at more equitable access? And so whether it's physicals for athletics, we have, some schools that have lower musical instrument, students who are taking advantage of orchestra or music, and are there, and maybe just staying with those two initially, are there some things that we should be thinking about collectively in order to make this more accessible and more equitable? And Monifa, I see is that a hand up? Oh, that's my cursor. My cursor was on you. And so it looked like you had a hand up.
No, but I'm happy to kick off the discussion. I was just waiting my turn, but no, you bring up a very good point. Did I freeze or is that Cynthia?
No, I think Cynthia is.
Oh, okay.
Cynthia's frozen.
Okay, I'm back. But now I'm getting the message. My internet is unstable. So any thoughts about that?
Yes. If you don't mind, I'd love to make some comments. And I first want to say thank you so much for the discussion tonight. And I think the topics that we are digging into are ones that, quite frankly, we've been thinking about for a while. And today we just had a work session about how do we make sure we are making change at this time because it's so meaningful is key. So Cynthia, on this topic, the very first thing that we have to do as we bring students back into our schools for services this year is to be able to see where are there opportunity gaps. You know, like I would imagine in some of our schools, some families and students have found it a more easier process than others to be able to get access to physicals because it's something they may have been doing for a long period of time, and others who haven't. But of course, you know this a lot. Us being able to connect with community partners to help us get a lot of things done now operationally as a system has been key. And that's something I'd like for us to be able to continue to do. Like, of course, we have a network of community members and partnerships that we just didn't have before for COVID-19 that allows us to be able to provide lots of health things, whether it's physicals, vaccines, or whatever it is, that expands beyond just those units that we've used in the past, which is go to your pediatrician or wherever. And now I think this is when we have to and must expand utilizing those partnerships to be able to bring processes like students getting their physicals done so that they're much more accessible to students and their families. Much like we've had to do with all things related to COVID-19, whether it's testing, vaccine, or whatever it may be. And that's bringing the services to different places, whether it may be community centers, within schools, when it's appropriate to make sure those services are done in those places. So I think that's the way, one way that we could absolutely move forward to leverage a lot of these partnerships so that we just make it, quite frankly, easier for families and students to have access. And the easiest way is to either bring the service to them, their community, or to provide that in schools. And I think the same thing for, I know we have Mr. Rump here with us this evening, but as we raise the question around musical instruments, if there is any student in this school system who may have a desire to, or a gift, you know, and they want to explore learning how to play an instrument or whatever it is, we want to be able to provide them with exactly what it is that they need. Here's an opportunity for us to establish partnerships with, again, organizations so that we can make sure that that is not a barrier. Mr. Rump, Dr. Rump, I'll send it to you if there are any additional thoughts you had about it, but I am open to hear even other, this discussion has been so great this evening, even other thoughts and ideas that this whole group may have as community members about what we can do to even further leverage that. But those are just my initial thoughts. Randy?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McKnight. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's good to see everyone. So just some general background on how we usually handle the instrument side of things is we don't have a central inventory. There's not one large MCPS inventory. All the inventories are maintained by their individual schools. But if we do have a student that is at middle school A and they want to learn how to play cello, but they don't have an extra cello, usually that middle school will reach out to another school in their cluster to see if there is one available so we can transfer to them. Obviously, sometimes there may not be one available. So then we try to reach out to other clusters. The teachers will reach out to Phil Barnes, who's our coordinator of instrumental music, and speak to him to see if we can find one. Dr. McKnight is spot on. We're very fortunate last year, even during the pandemic, Strathmore actually was able to purchase some instruments for us. Not only just regular band and orchestra instruments, but pianos, digital keyboards, and guitars for our general music students as well. So we're always looking to our community in different ways to find those instruments. We do have a standing line item in the budget for purchases that's mostly geared towards disadvantaged schools. But in the previous year's budget, Dr. Smith added an extra line, a one-time accelerator, because we had a lot of instruments that were need of repair, and he allowed us an extra line item in that budget to bring those instruments up to, again, get those instruments out into the students' hands. So even during the pandemic, we had a large influx of students that went out into students' hands to make sure that they were still performing. So we're always looking to find different ways to get that out there. Ms. Simonson, you mentioned it may be equal but not equitable. That's one thing that we know even within our office is one of the things that we're looking at is our instrument repair budget, because that is one thing that we control centrally, and it's a per pupil allotment. So we've been saying, well, if you have a larger program and you might have 2 bands and 3 orchestras, obviously you have more students, so you have more funds available for repairs. But if you're a struggling school or a new teacher trying to rebuild a program, you may not have as many students, but you have instruments sitting there, but they need repaired. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to look at from just inside our office is how can we address that? We've also been looking at, prior to actually the shutdown, I was actually out in school speaking to principals on how we handle the allocations that go directly to the schools for instructional materials, how they budget, how they distribute not only to instruments, but to fine arts, to drama, to dance. So we've been doing a lot of that background information and especially with the transition to the new hub, is there a means in the hub that we can track to see where funds are going and being used within to support the fine arts so that students do get that access to it? Because a lot of it does go back to the school-based side operations, because like I said, we don't handle funds centrally. The only funds that we kind of, in addition to the repair funds, the only funds that I mentioned, schools do receive some transportation costs to offset the costs for our county adjudications for band, orchestra, and chorus. Again, it's a smaller amount, so schools oftentimes use their discretionary funds to offset that so all the ensembles can participate. So that's one of the things that we're looking at too. And then the big one that we're looking at are our honors festivals that we have outside, honors ensembles, excuse me, that we have outside of the school day where students audition or they're nominated by their teachers. So that in itself is the one way we've tried to increase the access. It's not just audition, you can be nominated by your teacher. We've started to have those in different regions. So it's not just one ensemble for all of MCPS, it's usually split into different regions so students can access the opportunity and literally geographically be able to access the ensemble. Those are some of the big things that we've been doing on the fine arts side. So look at that access and equitable side.
Thank you. Hannah, and then Rebecca, and then we'll go back to the Jam board.
Yeah, Ms. Simonson, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up this issue. I was actually way earlier this year, I was visiting Benjamin Banneker Middle School, and I spoke to a few 6th and 7th grade students there, and they shared with me exactly the issue that you just raised, where they were interested in doing instrumental music, but they shared with me that they didn't feel like their families could afford the rental fees for an instrument. And so I really appreciate Mr. Rumpf and the opportunities he just shared. I just really do think on the school system's part, half of this is going to be a PR campaign, right? If families don't know that there is assistance in getting them instruments for their students, then they're not going to go through that process, and students ultimately aren't going to be able to access different extracurricular opportunities. So I certainly think that one thing MCPS could work on is making sure that all families, regardless of where they live in the county, are aware of different opportunities to get a hold of assistance.
Thank you. And Rebecca?
Yeah, so thank you. I too want to thank you for raising this issue. It's one that I feel like we've been talking about for 15 years or, my 15 plus years of involvement with all of this. And it's hard to find the perfect solutions. But Ms. O'Looney basically just touched on what I was going to say is, I remember a few years ago, I want to say 5-6 years ago, at one of our board meetings, I had asked about MCPS working directly with MCCPTA to try to figure out possible ways of putting a little more equity in where some PTAs can raise a lot of money, others cannot. Could it be something like for every time PTA raises money for something or whatever their budget is, 20% of it goes to MCCPTA directly, or 10%, whatever, where then people could apply for like grants or scholarships type of money. But the bottom line is that if people don't know that there's assistance, it doesn't matter how we go about putting money aside or where we put it or keep it, because we need to make sure that people understand that there are options for them. So communication is always a challenge. And that's something we need to continue to work on. But I do think that we should still continue to look at ways that we bring a little bit more equity into who can raise, who's capable of raising money and who's not, and who doesn't have the stronger supports.
Rebecca Smandrowski, you are about 30 minutes ahead of schedule, because that's exactly what we want to talk about in the next segment. Absolutely. And I think those comments are actually going to flow right into the next segment. But before we go there, I wanted to spend a little more time. I think what Rebecca is raising is actually, possibly one of the strategies that we want to talk about with this particular area, which is how to make physicals more accessible, instrumental music more accessible. And I do agree with Hannah's observation that it's not that, it's that space in between, knowing that you want to do it, but do you really need the assistance and trying to navigate that space where if it was just made available to you, you might take more advantage of it. But then the other pieces with after school activities and other enrichment opportunities, those are other areas where we see some schools and some PTAs do it really, really well, and they have lots of offerings for their students. Other schools, they don't have as much, and the PTA struggles with providing that enrichment opportunity. And so we wanted to go to the Jamboard, and Darlene, if you want to go ahead and bring that up again, I'll give everybody the link again so that you can go here. But maybe I'm going to give you the link. Nope, I can't give you the link. So if somebody could drop the link into the
can.
Chat. Okay, thank you, Darlene. But we wanted to go back to the Jamboard to talk about, are there, beyond financial, are there other obstacles to participating for students to participate in things like the physicals or in athletics or music, after school activities or enrichment opportunities? And wanted to just give you a minute, if you want to go to the Jamboard and give your first thoughts there. And if you are seeing this last screen, you're going to just advance at the top, you're going to advance that next frame, and then you can do this activity again. And you can choose a different color if you want. So what are the obstacles that you think for students participating, whether it be in athletics or instrumental music, after school activities or enrichment opportunities? So cost to participate, funds, transportation. Right. We don't have transportation for most of our elementary school students for them to participate after school. Students need on-ramps. They don't know that they could start learning a new sport or an instrument after elementary school. That's a great point. For some students, their reality is that family obligations or that they need to work prevent participation in these things. Costs and conflicts. Availability of activities and childcare, just awareness. Lack of preparation. right? So kids think that they need to come into middle school already knowing how to play an instrument, or certainly in high school, that you need to already know how to play the instrument in order to participate. Something a friend of mine, she was saying her son started, it was great. He loves music, but didn't play instruments through elementary and middle school, but the high school happened to have a guitar club, and there were donated guitars. And so that he was able to access music that way. And I don't know if all schools have that. So these are the obstacles. I'm going to invite you to advance one frame, and then to think about, so this next piece is, what are the strategies or the initiatives that might increase the access to these things? So, and we kind of divided this sheet into two things. Like, what are strategies and initiatives that MCCPTA or our PTAs, thinking of it collectively, what could they do? And what could the Board of Education do? Or MCPS, we could broaden it that way too. But what are the things that the PTA or the parent organizations could do? And what are the things that we think the Board of Education or MCPS could do?
Cynthia, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Of Dr. McKnight? For our wellness centers and things like that, our families are allowed to go. So you don't have to just be in elementary school to have access to the wellness center to get, like, for say, a physical for athletic participation. Is that correct or not correct?
Our wellness centers are supposed to be able to serve the community. While they are connected to different level schools, they should be able to serve families, family needs. So yes.
Okay, thank you. I know there's always a lot of questions about whether or not we can use them, and so I just wanted to clarify.
No, and I saw a suggestion in the chat earlier, which I completely agree. Yes, wellness centers to be able to support physicals is absolutely something that we should be doing and working with our DHHS department on ensuring happens.
So some of these, I don't know if they're for the PTAs or for the Board of Education, but hosting a physical fair in the summer, maybe that's something that our PTAs could do. Hiring mobile meds to actually visit sites. The PR campaign that Ms. Looney mentioned. Grants for participation. These are all things that the Board of Education. Permit schools to build an instrumental program by allowing staff to stay long enough to get momentum. Oh, I think I'm guessing that that's related to if you don't have enough students participating, you might only be able to have a 0.5 or a 0.7, and if participation goes down, then they're split between schools. Work with PTSAs over on the PTA side. Work with PTSAs with robust after-school programs to see if providers will offer discounted services to Title I schools. Operate after-school activities in elementary schools the same way as secondary schools, with stipends and activity buses and compensated staff leadership. Right, I saw MJ that is on here, and she actually just explained a lot to me about how those stipends work, and ECA and level 1 and 2 and 3 and all of those. So some things are available at middle school and high school that aren't available at the elementary school. So grant farm students who aren't in Title I schools. I think this is to grant them access to enrichment programs. Allocate funds to subsidize. Darlene, are you seeing other things in here, or Elsie, that I haven't mentioned?
No, you've been on point.
All right. So looking at some of this, I see some more popping up here, more robust system to support encouragement for extracurricular activities, many of which could be valuable opportunity for students to learn about professional opportunities or help students. Post an instrument swap, much like a ski swap, where people can donate gently used instruments and sports equipment, and people can pick up gently used instruments and sports equipment. Don't charge for the rooms to hold after-school activities that are offered as enrichment. Ensure an array of clubs and activities are meeting during the school day, so that students unavailable during the school day, like during lunch, so the kids that are unavailable after school can participate. All good thoughts. So kind of going back to our, I'm going to move back here. So any thoughts? Anyone want to provide some additional comment on this particular area? Any of these strategies really resonate with you, or you see how things that you might want to do? I'm going to call on Kathy Stocker.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I had a real light bulb moment during a forum organized for Youth for Equity at BCC High School when the students linked access and involvement with extracurriculars directly with equity and directly with the idea of cohesion in their student body. We have these structural barriers, whether it's kids who need to eat lunch and can't attend clubs, or kids who can't access activities like robotics or debate or Model UN. And the kids describe these barriers as not only barriers for an individual student who can't access these activities that can help kids win scholarships, get into school, pursue professional opportunities in engineering. But they also talk about these barriers separating the student body. So kids who can afford lunch, to buy, bring lunch or buy lunch, can go to the club meetings, and kids who have to access free and reduced meals have to stay in the cafeteria. And it never occurred to me how fundamental these barriers are. And it's so basic, like we could be providing lunches to clubs. We could be providing more mentorship to activities. So it's not just the schools that have involved and engaged parents who can pay for robotic supplies that can provide these opportunities to all of our kids.
Thank you. Leander from Damascus.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I apologize. I can't use this board thing. I'm not tech savvy. But just to kind of comment on this and just to give some perspective, one of the challenges that I see out there obviously is lack of, I guess, teachers and or staff wanting to do these things. I know at our high school, and I know Watkins Mill, we almost didn't have, sports teams, our regular known sports teams, because there wasn't a coach, and it got down to the point where we were like, okay, like, what are you doing about this? Or, what are you trying to do for that? And the other thing, just from, my daughter going through the school system and now being in high school, in middle school, it was kind of, if you wanted to play a sport, they only offered, whatever the teachers were willing to coach, but also it was competitive. So, if you wanted to be on the soccer team, you had to, be able to play soccer and know what a forward is or a striker or anything like that. So, in Damascus, we rely heavily on our, Damascus Sports Association. But, that's parent volunteers too. And that's not always people teaching these kids the skills that they need to do these things. So I think we need to have more teachers be willing to, teach these things to the middle schoolers. So that way, by the time they're ready to go to high school, they can say, okay, I have the basic skills I need to play soccer or basketball or whatever it may be.
Thank you. Dr. McKnight and then Garrick Yao.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I had two comments. One was to build off of what Leandra just shared, which is I think in order for us to do this and be able to sustain what we want to talk about, I go back to this theme of partnerships. Particularly after COVID-19, everyone's very thoughtful about how are we spending our time? What are we spending our time doing? How much time do I want to spend with my family? How much? And so we think about that along with a lot of the stress that's been just kind of put on educators as a result of the pandemic. And so our traditional structure is to put out, and I'm going back to my days of principal, put out a list of activities. Whoever wants to sign up, sign up. And then you know what you're able to offer based on interest. But I think we have to cast a wider net to community members, to organizations, to others, and bring them into the fold. So one, we may even start to get more areas of expertise around some of these extracurricular activities that we want to have available to our students, and not depend on one space that becomes a pressure point that then turns oftentimes into, you see a rotation of people who are hosting these clubs because they may only want to do it for a year or two. So I think we have to do two things: find out what is it that incentivizes others to and encourage them to want to participate in this, and then how do we cast that wider net? And then the second point that I wanted to make is this conversation is so rich because I don't see it very separate from the first topic that we just discussed around how do we connect with families and think about how we create a spirit of equity in all of this. So Ms. O'Looney brought up the PR campaign and communication, and she's absolutely right. That is a key point. And it has to be one that is communication around centrally. How does our entire community know how we're providing opportunity and access for all of these extracurricular activities, whether it may be how we're providing instruments for those who are interested, and so on and so forth. But then a school truly has to think about, how do we communicate this information to our community? And what do we know about our community that's going to make this message important to them and resonate with them? And I think that comes down to each school knowing, well, what does our data say? What are our students' interests? What are we able to offer? What are we not able to offer? And utilize that to make sure that message of communication is clear. And then the ask for the specific resource is clear and one that is meaningful to that community, so that whether it is a program, partnership for more music programs or whatever it is, we know that that's important to that particular school community. And I point that out because it's important for us to push against never losing that in a system that's large, when, quite frankly, in some ways it's just easier to generalize all of it, but we really can't. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And just related to that, and the PR and making it known, I wonder if there's a way to find, and I was on a call with, or a Zoom with Jeff Sullivan earlier today, and the athletics director, and he was saying how we're 2 weeks from winter sports starting, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to look at what sports did not take place, or what schools didn't stand up full teams during the fall session, and then to maybe look at is the, in the case of physicals, if they didn't participate in a fall sport, they probably didn't go ahead and get a physical to get ready for basketball season or whatever the winter sport is, and maybe looking at an opportunity to again, as you were saying, Monifa, bringing in those partners, bringing in partners to do the physicals. I've heard that some high schools do bring in an outside partner to get those done. Maybe it was at a community center, maybe it was at a church, but making that accessible. And so that would be a great thing to do. Garrick and then Sharice.
So I have a question about what I've heard is that MCPS has stood up a work group focused on out of school time. And like, what are they considering? And like, how does that, as it relates to elementary school age kids, so K-5 kids, I mean, there's a massive gap there, not only, across the Title I schools, but also a number of schools that have, high farms rates, and a lot of those kids don't have access to programming. And so kind of what's being considered, and are we thinking about a more of a public agency type model for Montgomery County? Just curious.
Good evening, Garrick. Good evening, Garrick. I'm Dana Edwards. Can you hear me? I think I went in and out. Perfect. Thank you. I'm Dana Edwards, and I've been dubbed the queen of out of school time by a few folks, so I will share with you where we are right now. We're looking at this in two phases. For this year, we are doing more groundwork and some pilot programs more so than anything. And the real focus is we do some things after school. We want to be able to look at what we do after school, and this conversation is right in the arena in which we are in terms of what we offer, who we offer it to, and where we offer it. Are there equitable opportunities for students regardless of what part of the county that they are in? The second component that we'll be doing this year is really taking an opportunity and learning from students and families around what the interest is in terms of the types of things that they want, because what we do recognize is interest may have changed from the pandemic up until right now, as well as availability of different resources. The second component is, as we move into next year, we're going through a reimagination process. And this is kind of that pie in the sky moment when we really think about not only after school, but weekends, winter break and spring break, and really to be able to conceptualize and really think about what opportunities do we want available for students and when, and how do we offer them? What we do know is that we can't do it only with the staff that we have. So we do have to think about those community partnerships and/or those outside agencies. Think about the people that we're working with right now, our Montgomery County partners that we do some work with, as well as some outside entities, and to be able to build on that. The service model would be K-12. And so sometimes we see a little bit more on the secondary end than on the elementary end, and we really have to think about that K-12 model to be able to support students. We also recognize that childcare sometimes creates challenges for folks, so we want to be able to provide that service. But we definitely have to hear and base it on needs of children as well as interest on families. So it's a work in progress for next year. And I was actually crafting an email to Cynthia as we were talking to be able to create an opportunity to further engage with your board about it and/or additional members, and look at what's the broader outreach that we can get and be able to have you support in terms of when we stage focus groups with families.
Thank you. Sharice.
Hello. So it's nice to meet you, Dana. So for MCCPTA, I'm the VP of Programs. And out of school time is a wheelhouse. We run a free after school program for students K through 2 in middle school. So what I would like to share with you all is that there's a lot of internal policy within the school system that prohibits a lot of the work that you're trying to do. The sponsorship of clubs after school or during school, having to be sponsored by teachers, is prohibitive because the teachers don't really have time. They may be passionate about the thing that they want to share with the students, but they don't have time, they don't have the extra resources, and so they're not available to do it. And if there's a parent or a community member who expresses interest in wanting to support, the policy doesn't really allow for them to. So unless you're working with a principal that might say, hey, we can figure something out, sometimes people don't want to have to work that hard to try to, offer something that will be beneficial, but the way the system is set up doesn't allow for it to be. Secondly, the way that the programs are authorized to be allowed into the school, whether it has to be through Rec Extra, whether it has to be through Collaboration Council, there are definite entities that have been situated so that MCPS, or at least this is the principal's mindset, can only work through those entities to institute programming into the school. Again, that can be prohibitive because those programs may have a cost that don't match the community. Those programs may not fit the profile of that community and what that community needs. And because there are so many different communities and so many different needs, if you have a generic program in a community, some kids may just not sign up. And so that's why you don't see an interest in it, because it's like, that's not hitting a target mark for me. So I love what you're saying about engaging the families and engaging the students, because the students that we talk to, the students who are going to school and engaging in fights every single day because they've got pent-up tension and anger because they don't have an outlet, they need the resources that are right here for them. But because the way the system is set up, you can't give it to them. So that is a barrier that on this call, the people on this call can break down with very clear communication and help these principals to get, and these teachers and these staffers who are getting hurt in school trying to do the things that they're not there to do. The help is there, but the policies don't match your ability to access the help.
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you done?
No, I am. I realize I got very passionate. I don't mean to sound, angry. It's just, it is troubling, and out of school time is something that is needed in a way that hasn't been needed before. You're talking about football and basketball and the traditional things. Some of those students, they don't get to go to the clubs where they can, pay for those programs. So they look forward to participating. I can tell you about middle schoolers who registered, have the clinical, whatever, the physicals they need. They go and they try out and they don't make it. And there is no B team for the students that don't make it. So, right. There's a bunch of different levels. If there is, any way to kind of, drill down to it and work in the schools, I think that is really needed to identify where those issues are. Thank you.
Sharice, thank you for your passion. I don't think you should apologize for your passion about it. Yes, I think it was yesterday was the board presentation, or Tuesday, where one of the things I did say in terms of out of school time is I definitely see it as one of those equalizers when we talk about equity for students, where the availability of what we offer and how we offer it are going to be able to open avenues and interests for a lot of our families, as well as for our students. As we do this reimagination, Sharice, I am going to ask you for your information to be able to join the cause with us. But to definitely really one of the practices we have to look at is how do we move the work forward, and really kind of examining who our current partners are and where we need to add on. Because we do want to expand, and we want to do it in such a way where, again, it matches that interest and need. So I will definitely be connecting with you just to kind of secure that bridge between the two spaces.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. And Sharice, thank you for raising those questions. I think that that's something where we could use a lot more clarity across a lot of our schools about what's allowable, not allowable. And it kind of leads us into this next piece about the equity of the PTAs and of the donations, and certainly we have some PTAs, and I'm sorry that our treasurer isn't here with us, because I had hoped that he'd be here in time to kind of help facilitate this portion. We've had a number of PTAs that have reached out, just with questions about what's allowable, what's not allowable. We've certainly had these conversations dating back to when we were meeting with Dr. Smith about, he was talking about, it'd be great if there was this sort of central fund, this ability to access resources. And I think that's where Ms. Mendrowski was going in her earlier comments. And what we've seen with our PTAs is we have some incredibly generous parents out there. We have, it is always remarkable to me how generous families are. And yet sometimes the world becomes very small for some of our families, that they're seeing the generosity, and they'll do whatever they can for their own school. But the idea of trying to support 209 schools becomes just overwhelming. That's beyond what most PTA members and families feel that they're able to really wrap their heads around. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, and I'm going to give you an example of something that we're seeing, and this has to do with the equity of PTA donations. And I saw that MJ is here tonight, and for those of you who haven't met her, well, I shouldn't even introduce her, because she's like my secret weapon. She's the supervisor of the auditors, and so she goes in and she's looking at how those independent activity funds are being used in each of our schools. And we had this situation with outdoor lunch this year, right, where Dr. McKnight was very clear, the expectation that all schools will be offering, opportunities to go outside, to use outdoor spaces. We'll be working with those schools, and some schools were really quick off the mark. They were able to work with materials management. They were able to order materials. Other schools relied on their PTAs to fund those, whether they're picnic tables or tents or those things. They were working with materials management, making sure that everything was clear, but they were buying those independent. And so it comes to the use of PTA donations. So where you have some schools that are maybe donating their monies directly into the IAF accounts, and it's accounted for in this 0025 account. You have other PTAs that are buying things through their just regular bank accounts. And so there's never the opportunity to really see how much money is flowing into the schools from the community, from the PTAs, or from the boosters, or from any of these community organizations. So there's that piece that I think has been like a rising concern or a rising issue within our community. And then the other side of it is that there isn't any expectation, and I think this is what Ms. Mendrowski was talking about, like where a certain percentage, I grew up in the South where, we talk a lot about tithing, like where some percentage of that, what you are bringing in is actually going into this other pool, this other place, so that it can be distributed to other places. So I wanted to just raise that, and I wanted to open the floor to any of our other MCCPTA board members that might have some thoughts about like how they've seen that the equity issues or the inequity of how donations are being raised. And then we're going to do one more Jamboard experience. So is there anybody who'd like to comment? You're going to leave me here? Okay, Laura Mitchell.
Cynthia.
Yes.
Go ahead, Carla, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just putting in the box that or in the chat, I'm sorry, that we had these discussions in the Budget Advisory Committee, I believe it was FY 2020, and Dr. Smith did put in, created a fund that was seeded with, I believe it was $20,000. And as I explained, the idea was that PTAs, PTSAs would opt in. As they had fundraisers, they would give whatever the percentage was, 5% of that to this fund. The idea being, of course, that the wealthier schools, the larger schools, the high schools would have more funds in their fundraiser, more coming in, but probably request less back out. So then when you needed some of the schools that had fewer funds would be able to request grants from those funds to offer programming like after school programming or international night or whatever it was, a readathon, a read night, something like that. So that was meant to try to help balance that out, but it was voluntary, of course, for the PTAs to join. So it never really got to get off the ground to see whether or not it would work. But I don't know what happened to that 20,000 that was seated in there, or if that line still exists and if it's been included in this year's budget. Was it in last year's budget? We never really got to kick it off. So my question really is, where are we with that? Will we try that this year? Will we continue that, or do we have other ideas?
Hi, may I just respond to Laura's point?
Sure.
Yeah, Laura, I think I vaguely do remember this, and thank you for taking us back in the year to COVID. Makes all of that a little bit messy to remember. I think this was a part of some type of innovation fund, if I am not mistaken, to be able to have flexibility. So of course, this had to have been the year in which we made a whole lot of shifts based on COVID-19 needs. But I think the place in which we asked the question, does that still become a priority, does come up in the context of the 5 areas that we're exploring in the DSEP groups. You know, if we see this as an opportunity that would help us operationalize better resources through PTA, do we think that is a priority now as much, you know, in comparison to the other priorities that we've come up with? So I think it's always a conversation and we think it's still important. That's the place where we elevate that to see how that then fits into all of the planning. Because remember, if I remember this correctly, this was like us trying to, we started with that amount of money, maybe just to say we could start with this and see how it goes, to see if this is something that we learn from, that we should expand on. And that's why much of our ESSER funding allows us the space to be able to do some of that again. So I think that's the space in which we explore, is if that's still a priority for us and that moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that doing that now while we have those ESSER funds as the backup is a good time to do that, because when that money goes away, that's kind of going to be all we're left with. So it's a good place to start and a good time, I think.
And Laura, we're going to be together tomorrow for Budget Advisory.
Indeed.
Prioritizing, so great conversation to pick up on there in our groups. Looking forward to it.
Carla, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
It was exactly that I had a memory of that something was started pre-pandemic, and I didn't know that it didn't go anywhere, but I think it's a great idea and we should get it back on track.
Right, and I think there's a good comment from Kathy Stalker about whether the funding priorities for this fund that we're talking about, you know, are those different than what the Education Foundation funds?
Yes, well, in the context of what we're discussing, this was put in as a budget line item, so it was not connected to the Educational Foundation funds per se. But I mean, that's another entity, and you know, even if the Educational Foundation does provide our, you know, an opportunity for us to work with different partners who can fund our interest, you know, when they know exactly what they are. So, I mean, we do utilize them if we're ever in a point in which we feel like we want to continue with an initiative or we need that in the system, but somehow it doesn't fit into our regular budget. So it's always nice to have that as a backup.
Right. So what we wanted to do is I'm going to send you back to the Jamboard, and not to the 4th frame, but to the 5th frame. And that is, and I think this is where, you know, having this conversation. So what could MCCPTA or MCPS do to mitigate the impact of these various, you know, the difference between what one PTA can raise and another PTA can raise, or the funding that's available to one school versus another school. And let's populate this and see what we have up here. So go ahead and get your stickies. I put the Jamboard back in the chat. A little harder, I see.
Someone added a note to screen 4. So I think some are we on 4 or 5?
We're on 4.
Okay, I'll move mine.
Oh, oops.
Sorry, I just deleted one so people wouldn't get confused and put it on a different board.
Okay, so I'm going to start reading some of these. Work with the Education Foundation to publicize its existence and how to access money. Many do not know. That's a great point. What MCPS can do, create countywide fundraising opportunities to fund these efforts. Maybe that's more of an MCCPTA thing, to do something like that, to fund this or to put more resources in. Get commitment from all PTAs to tithe 5% to this fund. Allow schools or PTAs to adopt other schools. You know, we have some that have done that sister program that had mixed reviews, I think. Sometimes it's worked great, sometimes not so great. But create countywide governing committee to dispense these funds so that PTA money stays under PTA control. Cluster school supports. At a hyper local level, we've seen sister arrangements that work really well. Right, this is what yes, we've seen it work really well, sometimes not. This is interesting. Sometimes they share speakers. And so encouraging our PTAs, if you're paying for a speaker, that you also donate a speaking fee so that a speaker can go to one of our more impacted PTAs. A metric that divides accessible pools of resources weighted to under-resourced schools, and then scaling up from there. I think one of the things, and something that we've been talking about just in the PTAs, and so when it comes to these ECA funds, and is everybody clear on what the ECA funds, the stipends, how those work. I don't know if that's a common knowledge thing, but I learned from MJ recently that every school is allotted a certain number of hours. So all middle schools get a certain number. I think it was 350 hours. All high schools get 840 hours, and it isn't weighted based on how many, like anything about the school. It's an equal proportion, and it's equal regardless of whether you have 1,200 students in your high school or you have 3,000 students in your high school. The principal is allotted 840 hours. But the thing I found so interesting is that schools are able to purchase additional hours. And those ECA funds are what pay for those after school clubs. They pay for the webmaster, and they pay for the FBLA sponsor, and they pay for some of those things. And so the question was, is that an appropriate or equitable practice to have all of our high schools, regardless of the impacts, having the same number of hours? And also related to that, is it equitable for one PTA to donate 1,000 hours worth of ECA times? Because as I understand it, the schools can spend more than that 840 hours. Just talking about high school, they can spend more than that 840 hours, but they have to pay for it out of their IAF funds. So some high schools may ask their booster clubs or their PTAs to fund additional hours. And so that makes it possible to offer more of those kinds of enrichment, more of those kinds of clubs. So extracurricular activity fund. Thank you for putting that in there. So I guess one of the things maybe to think about is how we can, are there ways that we can do that? Certainly we have a lot of things on this board that are PTA related that we could think about and take back, but also are there things like this that maybe are more in the MCPS or the Board of Education budgeting, as the budgeting committee that Dr. McKnight mentioned that's meeting tomorrow, to create more equity in this kind of area. Any comments or thoughts? I see there's a comment in the chat about there's a fair amount of confusion about what IAF funds can pay for and where that money comes from. I know that I was confused about that for a lot of years. I didn't realize that that's not money that is actually coming from the school system at all. It's all independently raised, and it's raised by the schools. If I understand correctly, each school gets a $1,500 starter, and they have to pay that back. So it's not that those independent activity funds are being funded each year by the school system. It's about the fundraising of the actual schools to support those activities. Kathy?
I think it's so easy to think about this issue simply in monetary terms, that some schools have, or some PTAs have more money and some PTAs have less money. But I think there's a real opportunity here for us to build community and linkages. So, at a high, I was saying we've seen some success around ideas with sister schools, because I think it shouldn't just be about a donor and a donee, right? It's about bringing communities together to share ideas. It should be a two-way relationship, right? Sharing ideas, sharing community, sharing events, and perhaps one community has some more resources to cover the expense part of it, but both communities are going to bring valuable ideas, valuable strategies, valuable connections in their communities. And I think that is a kind of more expansive and equitable way to think about some of these issues. I get uncomfortable when the conversation is just about, oh, these school, there should be these kind of donor schools helping these other schools. And the fact is, every single school in this system, no matter what their financial situation is, can bring so much valuable knowledge and passion for their kids and passion for their communities to the table. And so I think we can model relationships. And when those relationships exist, the money, then it's easier for the money to flow where it needs to.
Great point. Laura Stewart.
So I've been thinking about this for a lot of years, and I just wanted to bring up one point about the sister schools that I think we need to think about. So, because my kid went to a Title I school and we received stuff from the sister school. It was very obvious, like, sister school has the stuff, and then they are the recipients, and they knew exactly who the school was, and they know that's where the kids have the stuff go, and this is where I am. And so when I was growing up and went to religious school, we learned that the highest form of giving is the anonymous one, right? So you don't know where it came from. The person that gives it doesn't always even know where it went, because then it's more equalized. So I love the idea of sister schools, but every time I start thinking about implementing, I think about that relationship of the haves. They know who the haves are. Even if you have a good relationship, you always know that you're not the one that has. So of course they get the stuff, they'll know. I don't know how we can do that and operationalize it so it doesn't seem like they're constantly being just given things, and that they own it and it's part of their school. So anyway, it's just something I wanted to bring up because it gets tricky. So I don't know if we could, I don't know what's right, but I just wanted to bring that point up.
Mm-hmm. Right. I see Rebecca like nodding. Right.
I'm sorry. So that has bothered me for years as well. Or it's like, yes, they know. And I don't know, something about it ends up feeling a little less genuine, or, I just, and it makes it sometimes, to me, in parents that I have talked to, and even it makes you feel, small. It makes you feel like less. And so if it's something more where there's a general fund, and again, as I mentioned years ago, when I first started talking about this, it was, we ran two ideas by, one being just if you want to call it a tax, whatever, fundraising, a donation fund that MCCPTA itself would oversee, or, through the Ed Foundation, because of them being a 501c3, which I think most PTAs are anyways, but so that people can make donations even beyond just the, okay, here's what we're asking you to contribute based on what we can see is in your budget or your account right now. We know that there are some schools that really don't even have PTAs. Roberto Clemente, when I was there, we most times didn't have a quorum, a lot of times. So it is bigger, to other people's points, it is bigger than just about donating funds. It's about donating ideas and time and whatever. But I think that it really does need to come from a centralized location so that no one is pointed out as either a super giver or someone that's always being donated to specifically from, and especially because the sister schools tend to be schools that are located kind of close by where the sister school is. So I don't know. I just think sometimes, kids, whatever. I think you all get the point.
Right. So we have just a couple of minutes left. So Laura and then Carla, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Wolf to close this out.
So 2 things real quick. On the issue of donating to schools, we talked about, and we've gotten some direction about how to record monies that are given, but not things that are given. So if a school is given 5 picnic tables and 10 tents, how are they able to record that to keep that record equitable? And another thing that we haven't yet discussed is the time that the volunteers are giving. At Rosemont Elementary, there was a sign-in book. Not everybody used it, but we signed in all the time. And PTA should also know that that time can be used as matching funds for grants. And the schools should be aware that that time can be used as matching grants. So if we can do a system like where we check in at the school on the board, if we can say we're volunteering and that can track our time in and time out, then we could use that money as matching grant funds. And you can see the equity.
Right. Carla?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if PTAs are clear on what things the school system should be providing versus things that they have to fundraise for, because sometimes I see on social media, teacher X needs blank, blank, blank. Let's do a fundraiser for that. And to me, it seems like basic supplies that the school system should be providing. And if they're not, then that needs to be elevated. But I do see these fundraisers, especially at the beginning of the school year, all the time on social media. And I'm like, ugh, that's very troubling if the teachers don't have the basic supplies that they need, and the PTA feels like they have to fill the gap. And I'm grateful that they're filling the gap, but that's they shouldn't be that way.
Well, I think Cheryl Dyson and Diane Morris and James Koutzis can tell you that I am constantly sending them, all of those posts. And when there's these massive campaigns to, get copy paper for the, which I'm like, really? We don't have copy paper? And so it is sort of the education. It's the education of the PTAs. I can, many of us, when you were saying, do PTAs know? No, they do not know. And sometimes it's because there's been a long-standing tradition that the PTAs provide certain things. Francesca and I recently met with MJ to kind of go through some of those things that PTAs are routinely being asked for. And so, but we've also asked MJ to come and train our PTAs on the same things that you're training the principals on, because sometimes it's just reinforcing that and doing that on a routine basis. But yeah, it's a great point. And there's some really great points in the chat, and I do hope that we can get a copy of this for our records. Lots of resources that have been put in here. And I want to thank everybody truly for being here with us tonight. I think this has been a great conversation. I'm looking forward to going back through the Jamboard notes and engaging and having this conversation within our board and with our PTAs and to see what we can do. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with all of you. And with that, I want to turn it back over to Ms. Wolf and for you to close us out.
Thank you, Cynthia. At this time, I'm going to ask if there are any of my board members that want to say anything before we go. If you do, I can't see. Oh, go ahead, Ms. O'Looney.
Yeah, I saw a few other hands, but thank you, Ms. Wolf. I just want to thank everyone for having this conversation tonight, and particularly want to express my support for this final conversation we're having about equity, which I think is really, really important. I've spent 13 years in the school system, and I've been in different parts of our county. I've been in schools with very, very active PTAs who provided lots of support to the community. And I've also gone to schools where there was little to no PTA structure and support at all. And so I really see the benefit that an active PTA can bring to a school community, and would love to bring that to every single school in our county, regardless of where they're located in our community. So I really, really enjoyed the different ideas and perspectives that were shared. I personally love Ms. Mandrowski and other people's ideas of implementing a system where you take a little bit from every donation to sort of add to a general pool. I think that would be a really effective system personally, again, speaking on behalf of myself and not the board. But again, thank you all so much for having this conversation tonight.
Dr. Daka.
I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed what Lima was saying earlier, and especially the part where the other languages were conducting the meeting and the persons who spoke English needed to have a translator, because I think it gives them a better feel for what the families are going through. And for a long time, I've thought that we should have a new item on the board, business, to say that PTAs need to contribute 5%, 15% to a general fund that may be handled by the Education Foundation so that schools can get grants from there. I just think that this was a really good conversation that we had, and I really appreciate it. And the not propaganda, but, communication of some of the things that we do have available are very important. I'm with Ms. O'Looney on that. So I hope that we'll be able to run with these ideas and make some improvements. Oh, the other thing, the 840 hours, you need to talk with the principals about that, because there's some things that are traditional that you just have to do the hours with, and the hours are prescribed. We need to talk about how to handle that.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Sure, I was going to say, great hearing from everyone. I love the use of the Jamboard. So I know that we weren't talking as much, but there were a lot of great ideas, suggestions on the Jamboard. So hopefully I know we're going to save that, but no, that was a great, useful tool for us to use. And the discussion was right on time. And some of that work that, some of the questions that you all asked is work that we are talking about at board meetings. And I heard several comments about the instrument, about the innovation fund, that those are things that came up right before the pandemic. And so we talked about bringing that back on board and putting that communication out to our parents, but just appreciate you all for just being so thoughtful. Looking through the chat, there were a lot of great discussions going on and comments and suggestions. So just thank you for continuing to have the dialogue with the board and with the system. Is very helpful. So have a good night.
Ms. Mandrowski.
Yep, thank you so much. I too just want to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming out and talking with us. I mean, it's hard in the evenings when everybody has got everything else going on, but this is great feedback, and it is valuable conversations, and it's one that obviously hopefully isn't going to stop tonight. I know Cynthia Simonson well enough to know that it will not, but but I like this format. And I feel like it was a very robust conversation. It gives us some ideas of things to continue to talk to Dr. McKnight about. And I appreciate all of everyone's insights and your time. So thank you very much. And we'll see you. We'll see you.
Ms. Silvestri.
Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for everything that you do every single day. And in particular, I wanted to give you such praise for your Facebook group during the pandemic, the COVID response. It was such a valuable tool. I was learning things on there myself. And I think it was just so important for that you all created that. And then so many parents benefited from getting in real-time information about what was happening. So I really appreciate that. I would love to follow up on the interpretation issue. Maybe we could just do a follow-up call. We've been struggling with this for way too long, and I'm just would love to get my head together with some of you all to come up with some concrete solutions. So thank you.
Ms. Harris.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, everybody here I know knows what a fan I am of this organization and how much I appreciate the deep expertise you all bring to every issue that we try to tackle as a school system. And I see every day how the work that you're doing is helping us to be better. And we've been talking about this issue. If I can quote Carla a little bit here, we've been talking about this issue about some kind of a central fund to provide resources for the schools where a lot of the PTA energy is sweat equity and maybe not so much financial resources, and empowering them to create great opportunities for their schools and students. And I'm hoping with all the brainstorming we did here and the capturing of ideas, both in the chat and on the Jamboard, we can really kind of crack this. And I really, really do appreciate all that you guys do.
Thank you. And I want to thank you too, Cynthia. This has been a great conversation. It is only a pause that we're having tonight because this will continue. This has been a great interest of mine, the equity between PTAs in our various schools. So thank you again to everybody for coming out, particularly the members of MCCPTA. I also want to thank the staff of MCPS. I know it's been a very long day for you all, so I really appreciate your coming out to here also. So with that, have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.